Hello.
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 Yes, I had a little difficulty with it was asking me for a code, but Nicholas sent it to me, so we were able to get through, and we now have a quorum.
Yay.
So I will call this meeting to order. It is currently 6:40 p.m. Are
Uh,
there any adjustments to the agenda?
William, if you could adjust your camera down just a little bit, or there we go. That's beautiful.
Okay.
Looking great.
Okay. Uh, Hearing none. Is there anyone who wishes to read the acknowledgement, or shall I do that? Okay. We acknowledge that Barre City was developed on Saboki Abenaki land, which the Western Abenaki nation never ceded, made treaty for, nor were they conquered. We aspire to create a space in our meetings that is inclusive, participatory, and equitable. We acknowledge we all come from different experiences and that our experiences may be affected by racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, ableism, and many other systems of oppression. We are here to address equity within the systems of our city in order to inform the City Council of our findings. We acknowledge that systemic inequities exist and do not debate the personal experiences of marginalized and underrepresented community members. With that in mind, it is important that we are thoughtful of the impact of our words on each other in this space. Okay. And I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 2026 meeting. Are there any
So
questions
moved.
about those? What?
I move to accept.
Okay. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
I
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay. And old business, working group reports and assignments. Greg, do you have anything to report from the working group?
not really. However, we are going to be meeting on Saturday uh at the library at 10 a.m. And that time we will go over everything we have to go over and we will be reporting back at the next meeting.
Okay. Okay. And let me see, we have on your working group, it is in the minutes. Um, that would be you, Joe Ellen, Aurora, and Rick, I believe.
Yep. That sounds
Yes.
great.
Okay. Okay. And any updates on the items discussed in the last meeting? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to the language access policy update. Any updates on that?
No updates for now, unfortunately. So like I've been sick for the last month.
Hmm.
So I have had little energy to put into the language access policy. I apologize.
Well, it's you're doing more than a lot of us, so okay. And nothing on that. We'll move to the equity tool assessment of ordinance chapter 26, the public nuisance properties or nuisance properties. So do we wish to, does anyone wish to start the ball off here?
Um, sure. Um, I've read through the policy. I have kind of a,
Mm-hmm.
not a profound understanding of the procedure that's laid out in the policy. But it refers to setting up a process to arrive at a quasi judicial hearing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and service of notice by the police and such. Um, so just having a background in restorative justice and knowing that we have two restorative justice organizations within Berry City, I'm wondering if we could put together, one or two or three of us to kind of take a look at the possibility of suggesting a more restorative approach to nuisance properties than a quasi-judicial, court style process.
Mm-hmm. Well, it does seem to me that it starts by meeting with the owner of the property
Hmm.
and having a meeting and with the owner of the property and the board trying to come up with an agreement on how you're going to work things out. So you do definitely have the owner of the property involved at that level.
Hmm.
Um, and it's only if they're not able to come to an agreement that it then goes to the city council.
Right. So yeah, so it says a public nuisance property um is a property is designated such after three or more criminal citations within a 90-day period.
Hmm.
So it's good that there's a bar set there for, so it's like, I mean, kind of like it sounds like a three strikes kind of thing, or like once it becomes a pattern that seems like it needs to be dealt with. Um, um, Three or more civil violations of the Code of Ordinances, sets up a team of the city manager, the police chief, fire and emergency services chief, and or their designees.
Hmm.
So if the team believes nuisance activities are occurring that could qualify a property as a public nuisance property, the team meets with the property owner to develop a nuisance abatement plan. Um, yeah. So,
It seems like a gentle touch to start with.
yeah.
I also think that if I can just give some context, I think that
Go ahead.
depending on the infractions, if someone is a nuisance property because they're playing really loud music, like just
Hmm.
habitually playing really loud music, as an example, or
Hmm.
screaming and yelling or having really loud parties, that might be one thing that would really, maybe it would be helpful to have a restorative justice process where you get the tenants or property owners to sit down and say, okay, you have neighbors and you need to be more respectful of your neighbors.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
in other cases, it may be more helpful. I think the impetus for it was that there are a lot of houses around, not a lot, there are several houses in Berry City that are known as places where drugs are sold.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And they are a real nuisance for the neighbors who are living there because there's so much traffic. There are so many people just wandering around the neighborhood all times of the day and night. And
Hmm.
um, there's not a lot that the police can do. So I think that was what the
Right.
main catalyst was for this nuisance properties ordinance, if that's helpful
Hmm.
for you to understand that. I think it could apply to obviously more than that, but it gives the police a little bit more some more ability to say, okay, we've come here 3 times and
Hmm.
now we're gonna ask you to come in. It could be for any variety of things, but I think that's one of the issues that we're trying to address because people are
Hmm.
so frustrated
I see. So it
with,
was like to create sort of maybe a graduated approach to dealing with these particular issues.
yeah,
So yeah, I understand. So like if it's only left to police policy and state law and whatnot, policing uh law, then it's citation after citation. And I mean, where does it meet with the property owner's ability to enforce anything or try and compel more neighborly activity, I suppose.
yeah. And I think that
Um,
the issue, one of the questions I asked was, and it's addressed during in the definitions part of it is, some of the offenders are, people in like Northbury Manor or larger
Hmm.
developments, or, you might live in a multi-unit building. And so how are those defined? Because if you're going to call it a property, that's not really fair. But if you're going to the same unit multiple times in a row, then that's probably a nuisance property for your neighbors in the same development or in that
Right.
same building, and maybe even outside of that. But I do think that there's, depending on the property, it could be that the property owner doesn't even know what's happening if there are tenants involved. Let's say they're
Right.
renting a house or a duplex or something, and it could also be that the property owners are the problem. It's hard to
mhm,
say.
mhm.
Every situation is different. So
Right.
And the other thing I was looking at it is that what happens if you have a property owner who has tenants that you can't kick out, but are really the problem? Because I know that there's some rules and policies in terms of being able to remove a tenant.
yeah. So I think that that's part of why in the ordinance it talks about we could ask the property owner to come in, but we could also ask the tenants to
Right.
come in because it might be that the tenants need some more understanding about how it is to be neighborly.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And the other thing I noticed is that you can declare part of a property to be remove the occupancy. I forget the term.
Yeah,
The
the certificate of occupancy can
certificate of
be,
occupancy.
yeah, yeah,
So I suppose if you had a tenant who was a problem, and it was just that one unit that you could declare that certificate of occupancy, no, remove the certificate of occupancy, which would remove the tenant.
yeah. I
Okay.
think
So,
it's a really it's I'm in favor of the ordinance, and at the same time I recognize that we have to also balance it because we don't want to necessarily have more people who are unhoused and have nowhere to go. I don't think that um that's not the goal of the ordinance. But I do think that trying to get people to recognize that what their actions are impacting their neighbors is
Hmm.
really, I think, the point of this.
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. I think it sounds like it's I don't know who developed this policy, but it was probably, whoever did probably spent a lot of time developing it and figuring out what would work in terms of the situations that you're trying to address. Um, my what I'm the way I'm trying to kind of look at it is, what if you look at it from the other perspective of like, what if this policy becomes something that causes issues that it wasn't intended to cause, such as, let's say, one neighbor doesn't like another neighbor and starts
Hmm.
reporting them for being a nuisance or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then, so basically, a particular apartment within a multi-unit dwelling or whatever might get 3 citations, and then it becomes a public nuisance property. Then they're kind of at risk. So like, what's the recourse for a tenant who's like, I'm trying to do what I can do to address this, but it's the neighbor that's just like overreacting or whatever. It's
Hmm.
there's restorative processes, restorative approaches are really good at helping people um, kind of come to common ground
Hmm.
when there's like arguments on both sides. It's not always black and white. It's not
Yeah.
always one neighbor is doing all the harm, the other neighbor is suffering for it. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. And those are the situations where we don't want fallout being, okay, well, this person just loses their house because neither neighbor is, 100% good or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not a the the three criminal citations does not necessarily put you into the nuisance property. So
okay.
some there is some recognition for that. It's
Hmm.
so that if it's the city manager, the fire chief, and the police chief.
Get to
uh,
decide.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
Okay.
the fire and emergency medical services chief.
I
Hmm.
also
Police
think
chief.
that is definitely something that I was concerned about as well,
Hmm.
because, if you have a neighbor who just doesn't like if you have someone who just doesn't like their neighbor for whatever reason, because they make really stinky food or, whatever,
Or
like
their dog poops on your lawn.
their dog
Hmm.
poops on
Yeah.
your lawn all the time and you just keep calling the police about them, and that's not really, um, the police could come and say, this isn't really a factual, we're not even going to cite you because this is just your neighbor. Like maybe the first time
Hmm.
they'll come and say, okay, but I think there's some discretion there for the police to
Right.
say, look, we're only going to recognize this if it's really an actual concern and not just,
Rises to the level of, yeah.
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's true because the police, because this policy relies on criminal citations, we've already got police presence. The police are already making their judgment calls and
Right.
saying, okay, well, this sounds like something, okay, this person is saying the dog bit the daughter or whatever. And so okay, this sounds like something we can refer to restorative justice right off the bat, kind of because they're the ones making that they know
Hmm.
that that's a tool already available to them.
Is
So
that
I don't know.
is that how they do it though, Rick? Because I don't know if that's how it works. Is that how it works?
Yeah. So there's several avenues for restorative justice. There's direct referrals, which are called pre-charge pre-charge diversion, and that's the Attorney General's office allows police officers to make referrals directly to Justice Center,
Hmm.
and that would be Washington County Diversion Program.
Okay.
Hmm.
There's if a citation is sent to the court, then the state's attorney would be able to make a referral, the same kind of referral be pre-court, pre-charge, or they could charge the person and then send it for diversion, and that's kind of a little bit of a higher bar because then the person has the risk of like actually getting a charge put on their name, and so
Hmm.
that compels them to participate in the process in good faith. So those are options like outside this policy, and hopefully the police are well aware of those resources. Um,
And I
what?
don't think this policy would prevent any of that.
No,
No.
it wouldn't prevent any of that. What I think maybe a concern, another possible concern is like we're okay. So we have if we're talking about three criminal citations for one land, property owner or house or apartment within a multi-unit dwelling, maybe that's um good enough in terms of like, well, okay, this is clearly a continuing problem. I
Hmm.
don't know. So is
Well,
it
she'll
that the team? I'm trying to find the term. The yes. Oh, the enforcement team. Yeah. Um, so the city manager, police chief, medical chief. So are these all people who already have, their plates completely full, and this is like yet another thing for them to deal with? Are they going to, you know,
they can also assign people.
Yeah, it
Right.
says and or their designees.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So if this became too much for any of those three people, then what they would do, if you're getting this happening once or twice a year, then I think that they would deal with it themselves. But if you're
Hmm.
getting it like once or twice a week,
Hmm.
then you're probably going to say, okay, you're going to be my point person on this.
Yeah. I mean,
And
three criminal citations is a lot within 90 days. That's a
mhm,
lot.
Yeah.
yeah.
I wonder, yeah, I don't know. But because what if it seems like maybe well, so if the impetus behind the policy was to deal with like real problems, like okay,
hmm
there's drug dealing going on, drug use, and it's creating kind of a generalized, you know, safety concern.
Yeah.
Well, shall we look at the equity assessment tool and
Sure.
plug it in? You can find that online um, at the city website. I printed one off, so I'm just going to go over the questions here, and we'll see what we think about it. Um, well, we've got the proposal. It says the first thing is briefly describe the proposal, including background information. I think we've done that here. Is the proposal related to COVID-19 response or recovery? No. Um, what are the intended outcomes of the proposal?
I would say that that's to hold tenants and property owners accountable for bad behavior that impacts neighbors.
Okay. And it's I think it's more the owners than the tenants, but it does um
Well, I think it can be the tenants if the
yeah,
tenants are the problem, because it could be that the the owner, there's a situation I'm thinking of where the property owner doesn't live in the state and has no idea that the tenants are being very
right.
difficult.
Hmm.
The next question, what are the consequences for not implementing this proposal? We've already implemented it, but um I guess you lose a tool that you have to um address problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are the consequences of not implementing this proposal? I mean, if a tenant receives three criminal citations in 90 days, they're already kind of up the creek themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so what would this policy be able to do that three separate court dockets would not?
Well, I think the issue that like for someone who's a landlord, let's say, if
Hmm.
their certificate of occupancy gets revoked, then that's an additional consequence of.
Okay.
So I think there are other consequences. Basically, like you can't be a responsible landlord. We're going to revoke your certificate of occupancy, and that's really one of the
I
only
see.
tools that we have to, because the criminal system is the criminal system, and we're going to let
Hmm.
them take care of that side of it. But I
I
think
see what you
that
mean.
just saying like you're not being a good landlord, you need to get your act together here.
Yeah.
Um,
It's kind of a warning process too,
Right. Okay.
rather than going directly to the serious consequences. This is kind of a warning process that we want to work with you.
Hmm.
And I do think that that is what the city council was hoping, that the enforcement team would be able to work with the tenants or work with the property owner to say, we, how can we make this better? How can we help you?
Right.
Because we can't keep doing this. This isn't
Hmm.
good for anybody.
So my concern here is that we've got the enforcement team, and it's called an enforcement team, not a problem dispute resolution team or you know, an
Yeah.
equity team. These are all people in roles where, they have significant power and they are not in positions where they have the luxury of being like, well, yeah, let's see what happens, or like, let's hear from everybody and really take the time to weigh everybody's, what's the best solution for everybody. And neither is the landlord themselves. Like if the landlord is made aware, oh, shoot, I'm going to have like some serious consequences if I let this particular tenant continue, they're going to evict the tenant, right? I mean, that's like no question that the landlord, this doesn't compel the landlord, like, or let me pose
But
the
evicting a
question,
tenant is a laborious process, I believe.
right? But let me pose that as a question, like, how does this help a landlord solve a problem? Like if we're talking about situations
Hmm.
where this policy comes into play where it's not somebody's dealing drugs, for example.
Yeah.
Like I'm cooking, fish every weekend and the neighbor hates that.
Yeah. Then I
Um
think I think that's the kind of thing that is more restorative justice because it's
Hmm.
trying to have a more um, a conversation and find ways that they can collaborate and cooperate and live in the same general
yeah.
area
Okay.
or building or whatever. But I think
Yeah.
that, yeah, I agree. I don't think, enforcement, I think because when you're looking at it from a nuisance property, someone selling drugs, that seems like, yeah, we need to enforce our, rules. But, someone just cooking really smelly fish every single weekend is not necessarily, does not rise to the same level.
Right. Or we've had people in the past here who played loud music, had parties and played loud music.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Fortunately, they played good loud music, so it wasn't as much of a problem. But and so th this can be a tool. If they had played bad loud music, we might have complained.
Yeah. Right, right. Okay, but wait a minute. So public nuisance property means this is paragraph
Mhm.
definitions, paragraph A to property which the person has blah blah factual basis for three or more criminal citations or civil ordinance violation citations collectively. So that could mean literally just a three noise violations.
Mhm.
It absolutely.
So
If you
so
look at the
yes.
top,
So
yeah,
I'm saying that this definition, we're not talking about, oh, well, that would just be sent to restorative justice. No, like a tenant could receive three civil ordinance violations because of a crabby neighbor,
yeah,
and then have a risk of being thrown out by
But
the landlord because the landlord just wants the problem to go away.
right.
but the other thing is, of course, is that for it to be a citation, you actually have to be violating an ordinance.
Yeah, and like
And
noise ordinances.
right, but the noise ordinances, there are certain times when you're allowed to, um, there are certain times when you're allowed to make noise and certain times when you're not. So,
Yeah.
And
um,
I also think it's as we said, it's three violations within 90 days. So, if you're doing it once a month for 3 months, then yes,
Hmm.
you could potentially get in trouble. But or three
right.
times in 1 month, you could get in trouble. I
Hmm.
I do I agree with you, Rick, because I do think that it's a slippery slope having an ordinance like this because I think it could, reading through the equity assessment tool, I think it could have an impact on people who are in a lower socioeconomic class or status, worried about people who are renters more than people who are
Hmm.
Right.
homeowners,
Yeah.
people who are in larger buildings with multiple units versus, you living in a house in a neighbor who's like, there's a lawn between you and the neighbor. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of ways that I think
Right.
it could impact people who are renters, lower income. I'm concerned about that impact. Um,
Hmm.
And I don't really know yet because it just went into effect, I think, last month. So it's not, we really, I don't know if we have any, it hasn't even been 90 days yet, I don't think. So I don't think we've gotten to the point where we can say, oh, we have a nuisance property that's,
Mhm.
Mhm.
risen to that level yet.
Yeah.
Is
I'd
it
say that's my only concern is that it's not just three criminal citations, it's also the civil ordinance violations.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's to me, in my mind, there's the risk that the people who are administering this policy are like, I've got like 50 million other things to worry about. Let's just, send this along, without really making sure that it's a fair application of the policy.
For
And
item for
go ahead.
items that aren't about safety, they're about like noise or smells, is restorative justice the mandatory first step?
It's not mandatory at all. It's not mentioned in here at all.
no?
Yeah.
I
So I mean, I
that could be part of the suggestion, I
yeah.
suppose,
Yeah. I mean,
in
because
terms of
yeah, I mean, because what, these we are all people living in a community, and communication, right? Thing we're most especially designed to do is the thing that we seem to struggle with the most, and where it causes lots of conflict. But um, yeah, I think the first impulse should be, let's figure out how to build community around this. I mean, I got a new neighbor out back, and he makes his own sausage, and he moved his smoker under his porch because it was raining. But then it was because it was under his porch, all the smoke from the sausage came pouring into my apartment, and it smelled delicious. But I just went out back, and I was like, could you move that, please? Because I don't know. I think a smoke alarm's going to go off. Um, uh,
and the solution might be that he has to share.
yeah. Well, no, he brought me some, so everything was good. But creating community, especially if it's not around violent things, safety things, or things that are breaking the law. Um, how do we build bridges of understanding? And I think that, again, for the non-criminal, for the not dangerous,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think building the understanding first would
Mhm.
be the equitable thing and the responsible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in this case, there was a problem. Rather than contacting the police, you just spoke with your neighbor. And I think that that's something that it's not always going to happen, but I think in many cases that's what happens. And this is a tool that gets us when all else fails, essentially.
Hmm.
But shall we move on to the next questions in the assessment tool?
Sure.
And what I will do is I'm making notes on the assessment tool, and then as part of our, um, we'll, I'll include that as part of our minutes for the meeting here. Are there fiscal implications of this proposal for the city of Barre? I think there could be if it turns out that there are a lot of hours, a lot of people hours that are used in making the employee hours that are used in order to resolve the situations.
Hmm.
But
And to Rick's point earlier about the people who are part of the enforcement team, they're already have other full-time
right.
work that they're doing. And so the fiscal implication could be that they're not able to handle something else and we need to hire additional staff or bring in someone else to help with that. So it could potentially be an issue if it becomes,
Hmm.
there becomes multiple nuisance properties that have to be dealt with.
Right.
I think one of the things we should consider as we go through this assessment tool is uh, how do we get this assessment tool to be used as plans are being developed? because really it's, this is supposed to be for, policymakers or
Hmm.
whoever
Yeah.
is making decisions. Um, and we really need to somehow get them to consider using this as part of the planning process.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, as we go through, we need to think about anything that an angle to get people to say, yeah, we should really have used this tool.
I think using the tool is a great idea, Greg, and it was suggested, it was asked, and it was not used. It often isn't because there's this sort of urgency to get it
Mhm.
approved. But I do think it would be very helpful to have us as a city council work through it, or if the city council said, hey, JIB committee, can you go through? This is our proposed, we've had a first reading, or we're going to have a first reading. Could you give this run it through the equity assessment tool as your part of your agenda, and we'll bring it up at the next meeting and you can report back what your findings are. That would be really helpful, but I think that's not part of the process yet. And
Mm.
Yeah.
so,
Although
I
as
mean,
the liaison could bring items
absolutely.
to to our attention that we could then, even if the city council isn't asking us to do it, that we could still do.
Yeah.
yeah.
The only issue is I think if we're not part of the process. My concern is
Hmm.
that depending on when we meet and when these happen, we could have two meetings and the city council could have two meetings and have a first reading and a second reading, and we will have never met in that time frame. Do you know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think we have to, in some ways, I think we need to slow down the process of first and second readings so that the JEDI B committee could have time to review them.
Or presumably, people like the city manager, police chief, and emergency services chief were consulted on like their input for this policy well before the first reading. So maybe the JIB committee could be one of those
Yeah,
consultees.
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's part of what the assessment tool is supposed to encourage. Uh, so yeah, if we can, I guess we'll have to become a nuisance in order to get our voices to be heard. You might want to use this tool because it's useful. I mean,
Hmm.
take a
Yeah.
little extra time, go over the questions and think about things that you probably aren't thinking about.
Right.
Well,
Yeah. Because I mean, certainly the city doesn't want this policy to be misapplied.
Right.
yeah, and I think that all of the points that we're raising are good points that could be incorporated into this. We could change the name of the enforcement team to something else. We could build in a restorative justice piece. All of those things are easy enough
Hmm.
to add in and address. But
And
it
it's much easier before it
before,
gets, yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm. Okay. So is the proposal evidence informed? I'm assuming that they were having problems and where they were having police go to the same drug houses time and time again, and they did research on it to determine, well, what's the best number?
Well, and I
Is it
think that this is
yeah.
was modeled after another policy in a different community in Vermont.
Okay.
I can't remember which community, but often we're not just making things up from scratch. Someone else is trying it, someone else is doing it, it's
Hmm.
working successfully, and that's why we're thinking it may be helpful for us.
Okay, so I would say that the answer to that would be yes then.
Yes.
Okay. Does this proposal advance the strategic goal and or key performance indicator of the Berry City municipal plan or strategic plan when developed? I believe that the plan is now developed.
Yeah, I can honestly say I don't really know that much about the strategic plan or key performance indicator of the municipal plan.
Okay.
Um, it's not something that is often referred to, which is unfortunate because we do have a strategic plan, but It's not like, oh, I know what the, 5 points of the strategic plan are. I can obviously go and look it up, but we have a strategic plan and we don't use it. So that's another criticism, but I'll save that for another day.
Okay. Are the desired outcomes specific and measurable? I would say you can measure the number of nuisance properties that you have. I would just think that the desired outcomes are that um, you get to a point where the number of nuisance properties is significantly reduced, and that the problems that lead to the properties becoming nuisance properties are eliminated. Um,
Yeah, so that points to section 26-2 purpose. Properties where police are repeatedly called are public nuisances that threaten the public health and or welfare. Vermont law authorizes the city to define what constitutes a public nuisance. The city council therefore finds public nuisance properties as defined that threaten the public health. Um, yeah, the
yeah,
actual purpose, like it's not super clear to me, like in that purpose section. So like what are the desired outcomes? Like, can you answer what are the desired outcomes based on this section purpose?
No, I mean, I think that the desired purpose is to reduce the number of nuisance properties, the number of properties where police are being repeatedly called for offenses. I think that's the
Mm,
point of the nuisance properties ordinance.
hmm
But it doesn't say that. It just says this is,
right. It doesn't show a goal. It's
yeah.
just, but it's a statute. It wouldn't necessarily show a goal
mm,
in a statute.
yeah, I don't see why not though.
Yeah. Yeah, statutes generally don't tell you they tell you what the rules are, but they don't tell you
Why?
necessarily why the rules are.
Right.
So would we say a yes or a no to that question? Are the desired outcomes specific and measurable?
Mm, hmm. That's a tough
Assumed
one
but
because
not listed?
I
reduce
would
the
say
number. Well,
the
so my problem, so like I would edge toward no because to define so the nuisance properties are defined by the very policy that's intended to prosecute those nuisance properties. So every single nuisance property that's identified is being, resolved, right? I don't know. So in other words, whatever this policy gets applied to. Well, never mind. So yeah, so we'll see like if wherever the policy is applied, however many properties this policy is applied to, let's say that's 100 or let's say 10. That's too many for Berry City. So let's say that it's 10 and only one results in an eviction and the other nine result in no further violations, then that's the rate of success, right? So yeah, maybe
Yeah.
it is yes.
Greg, you had
yeah, it would be interesting to know if they have any plans in place to measure the the results.
okay.
They do have, I mean, the police, we had a really great report, data analysis at the last council meeting, maybe. And every time a call comes in, it's, they report it, there's data collected. It's
hmm
very, very interesting. And I think we are supposed to get a follow-up report on this and the no trespassing ordinance that was put into place. So it will be interesting because we built into the ordinance there isn't any metrics built into the ordinance, but on some level the police chief knows we want a report back of how is it being used, is it working, and so
Okay.
they will have to. the police will have to come up with whatever that metric is to say, yes, it's working or no, it's not working.
So I would think we can't really say yes or no on that, but we can say that it is assumed that the outcomes are specific and measurable, but it's not listed.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you have sufficient population level data to understand whether the proposal would address or create any racial disparities?
I would guess we don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. If
Yeah.
not, what data would be needed?
Well, I don't think that I think this would be an after the fact because if,
Right.
the police are going to nuisance properties and it happens to be, oh, every single time they go, it's a Hispanic family or something like that, well, that would be a racial disparity. But I don't think that we would know until after the fact.
Right. And of course, the other thing is that while it may be something that's a disparity toward the individuals who are being cited, it's also something that this has a measurable, it should have a measurable positive effect on the people around, so that, even if every person who's cited, let's say every person who's cited is Hispanic, but it turns out that the neighbors are Hispanic and they're very grateful for the policy because it's making their lives better. But
It's potential. That's certainly a potential, but I think it's hard because
yeah.
I also think it's really hard. I think the equity assessment tool is important and maybe focuses on racial disparities, and at the same time, we have a very small number of people of color
Mhm.
in Vermont in general, just because we're mostly white. So I also think about not just racial disparities, but that's where I came up with I'm concerned about the socioeconomic disparity.
Yeah, I would agree
Yeah.
with that. That this most likely will have a greater impact if we're looking at rental properties. It will have a greater impact on those of a lower on the lower social economics ladder.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Although I suppose the drug dealers may be a little bit higher on the social economic ladder.
Yeah. Well, considering that one of them had $100,000 bail when they were arrested and they posted the $100,000 bail and were back out on the street the next day.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely not the
Okay.
same socioeconomic status.
Another grouping that comes to mind is people with disabilities,
Mm,
who are often kind of misunderstood in conflict,
yeah.
Hmm.
and among neighbors. Like, let's say there's somebody who's whatever. I don't know what it would be like. Somebody who's developmentally disabled and has a tendency to scream once in a while, and the neighbor just really gets sick of that, and then they rack up the civil citations, and then what do you do about that? Like, I guess that's another kind of situation
Hmm.
where hopefully the police would know their community well enough to be like, let's solve this another way. Let's not put this person out on the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I also think about, you know, let's say a single mom who's living with, teenage kids and, like just imagining what that might look
Hmm.
like. And so that could be difficult as well. And, just thinking about the different ways that people who are, maybe challenged because of their circumstances would maybe be more targeted or more likely to show
Hmm.
up as a nuisance property when really all they need is more support and more help. And so How do we make sure that we're
Mhm.
giving them all of the tools that they need and not just saying, "Oh, you're evicted. Sorry, get out because your kid's playing really loud music all the time."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also looking at in doing the research for this, I was looking at the building ordinance, some of the building ordinances, and um, which are one of them is it looks at the number of bedrooms and the number of occupants you can have in a bedroom,
Yeah.
and which it limits it to two per bedroom, which we had three boys living in one bedroom, so that would have been in violation of the building ordinances. So I think that's another thing that I just found interesting that maybe something that we want to look at some whether some of the other ordinances might that relate to this might have a bearing as well.
Yeah.
Um, if implemented, can you collect disaggregated demographic data, track it, and evaluate it to assess equity impacts? Um,
I think you could, but I think it would be difficult in the sense that it's, I think about
privacy concerns.
yeah, because, if you're talking about, oh, a single mom who's living with a teenager and you're trying to like it's in a certain development, let's say, well, it may be easy to figure out who that is. That's not really helpful for that family.
Hmm. And yeah, it would be it's like when we um, when I was on the Board of Civil Authority, one thing that they had a machine to help a voting machine to help people who were um, visually impaired.
Mhm.
But the problem was that if you had one person using that, that you would know how that person voted. So they had to have at least one or two other people also using it. I would think you would want at least two or three other people using it who didn't necessarily need to use it, so that you wouldn't necessarily know how that one person voted.
Mm, yeah,
So that could be problem. Well, if you're getting too specific in terms of where the problems are, then it would be identifying. Of course, I believe that the people who are identified as nuisance properties, the properties would be identified because it would be a matter of the um, public record.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Are there staff trained to analyze the data related to the proposal?
I'm gonna go with no.
No reason to think so.
No. I think it could probably be analyzed, but I don't think that the staff are necessarily trained to do that.
Which other committees or local stakeholders may have an interest in this proposal or its outcomes? Certainly the Police Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
downtown business owners or
Yeah.
business owners, property owners.
Yeah. And I would say I would add Washington County Diversion Program, who have a stake in community equity
Hmm.
and a lot of expertise around that as well.
Hmm. I will also say that when I don't think for this particular ordinance, but for the no trespass ordinance, we were moving ahead with it and we hadn't even contacted the state's attorney who works in Barre. And I
Mhm.
contacted her to say, "Hey, do you know we're talking about this?" And she came in and gave some feedback about it, which was really helpful. But I would think
Mhm.
that would also be someone that we should go to because
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
she's working with people who are already involved in the criminal justice system, but also
Right.
could help us like, okay, you might want to think about this, and this before you go down that path.
Mhm.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Uh, does the proposal encourage or prioritize contractors led by members of marginalized groups? I don't, this may include but not limited to vendors designated as minority or women-owned business enterprises or disadvantaged business enterprises. I'm not really sure that this is applicable.
Not
I would
relevant,
agree.
yeah.
Describe the proposal's target population, including demographic information such as race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, religion, political affiliation, etc.
Well, target population would be everyone because it's
Okay,
intended to make things safer and more livable for everyone.
okay. And how was this target population selected? Well, the ordinance applies to everyone, and um,
Mm.
did you meaningfully consult with community members in developing this proposal?
It was warned. We had a first reading and a second reading, but I don't think I would not necessarily call that meaningfully consult. I don't,
Mhm.
they
Yeah, how
didn't
many people
consult the
typically
Jedi B committee, so.
how many people typically show up to a first and second reading of a policy? Like
Oh,
community members.
there's not usually people who are showing up specifically for the policy because I don't think we're, as I said before, like for the state's attorney, we're not saying, "Hey, we're going to talk about this. Could you come and join us and give us some feedback?" Or we're going to send it to you ahead of time. Could you give us some feedback? I don't think we are doing a great job at consulting with community members and stakeholders before we present a policy. I think it's usually city manager, police chief, maybe the mayor are saying, "Hey, we need another tool," and then they just move forward with it. And so I think that that's an important one because I think we could take a little longer and more meaningfully
Mhm.
consult.
So it was warned, but there were no special attempts to notify the public.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I seem to recall hearing about it before it passed, but there was I think I might be confusing this with a nuisance ordinance that was not nuisance property ordinance.
There was a no trespass.
Yeah,
That one, there was that one that was also controversial in the sense that it could negatively impact people who are unhoused, let's say, and that did not go
right.
through the equity assessment tool either.
hmm I think it was a anti-harassment ordinance, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay. If so, did those community members include persons of color? I mean, if
no.
there were, what geographic areas of the city will be most impacted by the proposal?
Yeah, lower income
So probably
neighborhoods.
Northbury.
I would say where there's, a concentration of people who are living in rental units, I think are probably going to be more apt to be
Mhm. The
most
floodplain.
impacted. Potentially, but it also could be like Green Acres and Barre Housing Authority. It could be Northbury
Okay.
Manor. It could be any of those
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I
larger.
would put multi-unit dwellings on that
Yeah,
list, like any multi-unit dwelling, really.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there a larger than average population of Vermonters of color in those areas?
I would say probably yes.
Probably yes, but I don't think
hmm
we know for certain.
Okay, so I'll just say probably, but not known for certain.
Yeah.
How will the proposal incorporate cultural concerns of specific groups, i.e., use of traditional healing practices, use of culturally appropriate diagnostic assessment tools, etc.?
It doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will public written materials generated through this proposal be translated?
Uh, no, I don't think we have done the city. I mean, we've talked about the
Mhm.
language access um tool, and I don't think that we've really f- talked about at a city level about making sure that things are translated so that lots of different people can access it.
Mhm.
Of course, if the tool was used, perhaps they would have thought about that, but just saying.
Yeah, I think you're
Well,
right.
I'm wondering if the city ordinances, um, policies and ordinances, if there's a tool that can be used to translate those
Well, I'm
into
sure if you
different
were able to
languages.
get to the site and then, copy and paste it into like a Google Translate, you'd probably be able
Yeah,
to do that, but um that puts a lot of the ownership of that happening onto the person who's maybe already struggling with
right.
finding their way in the world
Hmm.
because of their a language barrier. So,
Okay. I'm just putting refer to language access tool on that.
yeah.
Um, and so not in any languages at this present time. Does this proposal involve a social marketing strategy for the target population? I would assume no.
Hey, William, I did some quick Googling and I found a document going back a couple of questions. So I'm posting something in the chat here.
Okay.
It's a link to vhfa.org, Vermont Housing Finances Agency, I guess.
Okay.
Um, it's a document, a publication,
Hmm.
VT-HNA-2025-race.pdf, just for the record. On page 106 of that PDF, it says white Vermonters are more likely to own their own home
Right.
than BIPOC Vermonters. The difference is most stark between white and black Vermonters. Only 20%, 26% of white households live in rented housing compared to 72% of black households. So I think that's pretty definitive that it would disproportionately.
It like it likely would.
Yeah,
Unless Barry's an outlier, which I have no reason to believe that it would be.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that would be 17A is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So does the proposal involve a social marketing strategy for the target population? Um,
No, I
I
would
would
say no.
say the answer to that is probably no. But I don't hear anything. So,
No, I said no. I said,
oh, okay, no.
yeah, no.
Okay. Does the proposal seek to reduce disparities for groups of people who are marginalized or underserved?
No.
What are the anticipated positive outcomes for the target population? Um, Fewer
Quicker,
nuisance properties.
yeah, quicker response to crime, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's the intended outcome.
And maintaining housing.
Yep, that's true.
Okay. Can those positive outcomes be replicated or extended to other groups? I think the anticipated outcomes are for all groups.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I would say yes on that. Um, if so, which groups may benefit? The the thought is that all groups will benefit,
Hmm.
unless you count drug dealers as a group.
Yeah.
Does the proposal enhance services to communities that are underrepresented or underserved?
Yeah,
Yeah.
possibly, because it could increase scrutiny on landlords of, low income housing.
Hmm.
I also think that because they added the exclusions of acts that are related to domestic violence or sexual assault, medical emergencies, potential
Right.
child neglect, stalking of an owner or tenant of the property. It also could have the additional um, positive benefit of maybe identifying those situations and helping support people who are, having, uh,
Right. In those
involved
situations.
in those situations. Yeah,
May help identify victims of domestic abuse and so forth.
right.
Mm.
But they're not going to be, because I was really concerned about that. Like, people are going to be like, I don't want to call the police because we've already been called twice,
Yeah.
and now
Right.
grandma's, having a heart attack, and that's definitely not, should not be counted. And
Mm.
they're very
Hmm.
clear about that. And also with domestic violence or sexual assault, because, if that's happening on a regular basis and police are being called because of a domestic situation in a particular home or on a
Hmm.
particular property, then you don't want the people to be like, oh, I can't call anymore because
Right.
Mm.
so I think but hopefully feeling like you can call, maybe the
Hmm.
people who are involved in the situation could get more help. That would be my hope.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
on that point though, I mean that's something that really needs to be communicated because I can see how people would jump to the opposite conclusion automatically.
Yeah, they would be afraid of calling.
Right.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm going to have this ordinance thrown in my face. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'm afraid to call and I don't want to get in even more trouble.
Especially if it's the owner who's the victim.
Or if it's if it's, I'm thinking about, in a domestic violence situation, if the property owner is, let's say, a man who owns a property and it's a girlfriend who's living with him, this is her
Yeah.
home, this is where she's living, and then she's afraid of calling the police because she's going to be unhoused.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that happens anyway, but this
Yes.
just complicates that.
Mhm. Could a disparate racial group or other unintended consequence result from the proposal? It's definitely possible.
Well, I think based on Rick's statistics here, yeah, I definitely think it's possible.
Hmm.
Hmm.
If yes, what steps are you taking to mitigate the disparate impact? Um, I think what you have is basically it, there may be more people who are found. Well, I'm going to use the socioeconomic. There may be more poor people who are um, cited because of this, but it also, if those poor people are creating a problem for the other people who are around them, probably of the same socioeconomic nature, it may very well have a positive impact on the group as a whole.
Yeah, and I would encourage us to write something in here about um, modifying the policy to include an option for not just a quasi judicial hearing, but also a restorative referral, so that we can find root causes and provide support to people who are
Hmm.
causing and receiving civil violations
Right.
instead of labeling them as a problem and, just making the problem go away.
Yeah.
I do think that there's nothing in the policy that would prevent the use of restorative justice um as part of the process.
Right. But if it's not spelled out in the policy, then most people are not going to think of it
Hmm.
as an option.
And I also think when you think about the fact that this is an ordinance and we have, a mayor who was just elected, but it could have been anybody, and a city manager who's leaving, and a police chief maybe who's brand new. I know our police chief isn't brand new. City council, that's completely different than the council that adopted this. Then without that in writing, that quasi judicial hearing could become very punitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and theoretically, if you have someone who's an enemy of the people who make up the quasi judicial board, then that could be problematic as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think mentioning some kind of restorative justice, especially for
Hmm.
issues that are not a public safety issue, is would be really helpful because then it would
Hmm.
just be very clear, like, okay, your teenager's playing really loud music. We need to do some restorative justice here.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Well, even
and it,
even
it
for
it could be something as simple as just indicating in the policy there is um nothing in the policy that prevents the use of restorative justice.
Or just that restorative justice should be considered a uh,
A
first,
tool.
yeah, one of the primary
yeah.
tools when you're talking about something that's not a public safety issue.
Hmm.
Well, also public safety issues because I feel like there isn't this policy does have enough teeth that if it is a public safety issue and it's sent for restorative justice, a solution can be found to a public safety issue. I mean, we see people who are, drive drunk and
Hmm.
all kinds of public safety situations are referred to us, and
Yeah,
our job is to work with those people to identify and understand the harms they pose to themselves and everyone else.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
So,
definitely think it could, depending on, I'm sure this is the case though, Rick, depending on the person in the situation, it probably works really well, or maybe the person is just like, it doesn't matter what you do, they're
right,
not in a place where they're going to be able
Hmm.
right.
to listen and hear that.
Yeah, and that comes out in the restorative process. If they don't engage, you know, in good faith or don't meet a certain standard of taking responsibility, then
Hmm.
they get sent back.
Yeah.
So
And
then,
as we've seen, the first step in this policy is meeting with the property owner and potentially with the tenants as well as and coming up with a plan.
Hmm.
yeah,
And it's only if you're either not willing to meet or can't come up with a plan that the parties can agree to that
hmm,
it goes to the next level.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond the steps described in part A of this question, um, what additional steps could any entity take to mitigate the disparate impact?
So, sorry, but so what you were talking about is section 26 for procedure, paragraph
25.
C. No, no, no.
Oh, okay.
What you're saying is the first step is the meeting to try and address the conditions.
Right.
That's 26-4, paragraph C.
Hmm.
Um, the meeting is between the enforcement team
Hmm.
and the property owner.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily restorative.
No,
Right.
it's basically they meet to try to come up with a solution.
Right.
I mean, it's
But
and
if the voices of the people who are going to be evicted are not represented in that meeting, that's not restorative, and that's not
Well,
necessarily seeking root causes of what's going on.
the
I'm
the
thinking,
it
next
does say
sentence,
property tenants may be requested to attend such meeting.
May be
Yeah.
Um,
requested. Yeah.
Yeah.
so I would interpret that to be that if it's a tenant who's the problem, then you would make sure that the tenant was involved.
Okay.
That would be my interpretation. It's not necessarily spelled out that way, but that would be
Hmm.
the logical interpretation of what would be done in that situation.
Hmm. So leaves it to the discretion of the
It
enforcement team.
does.
So yeah, I don't know. I'm just seeing a lot of
Mhm.
possibility that this.
So you could outline that the offendant should be part of the process, even if it's not a property owner.
Well, I'm just saying we have a very rigorous and practiced group of people
Hmm.
whose job it is to find ways of finding root causes for harm, for having people face their responsibility for such harm. And I think that's a pretty crucial. I'm not trying to
Hmm.
sell restorative justice. I just think that it works really well, and it's much more nuanced and
Hmm.
much more nuanced than a lot of other approaches.
But would you say that you should make it clear that the offending party should be involved in that meeting?
Yeah, at a minimum.
Okay. Is there a disparate impact for any other marginalized group, including but not limited to groups identified by national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, etc.? Um,
I'd say yes.
okay.
I think
And
Hmm.
I think you could name a lot of other people. Rick was saying, people with disabilities. I think, when you think about age, you think about most younger people are the ones renting, and they,
right.
versus owning a home or being the property owner. Um, Seniors, you could also have seniors and
That's true because the senior living would be considered a property.
yeah.
Hmm.
And then the socioeconomic part, I think, is
Hmm.
Yeah.
that we've talked about already.
Okay. If yes, what steps are you taking to mitigate the disparate impact?
Yeah. Again, here I would possibly put in a suggestion like insert restorative justice as one of the ways of approaching a
Hmm.
solution.
I also think about, someone like I think about a situation like the Northbury Manor where it started out as senior housing and there's a lot of seniors that live there, but then there was a claim of discrimination, and now anybody with any kind of, disability might be able to live there. And
Hmm.
it's not just senior housing. And so that's fine. But at the same time, it's opened it up, and there's, people living there who are dealing drugs, and there are seniors there who feel unsafe because they don't want to go out, they're afraid to go out of their apartments. And how do we make sure that we're not creating more problems for the people who just want to be able to live, in a safe environment? And I know that, we have to, obviously, this is the point of this whole thing. We have to be equitable. And at the same time, we also have to be careful and protect um,
Right.
these populations that are maybe more marginalized.
And presumably that part of the disparate impact is that the hope that you will make this safer for the marginalized groups.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the other thing I think about, like, I think about age. I think about, my daughter lives in Burlington, and I imagine being a person like a working person in Burlington living with a lot of college students is probably not a lot of fun because they're probably loud, they stay up
Hmm.
late, you know what I mean? Like just thinking about an age demographic versus, senior citizens maybe go to bed at, earlier. And so
Mhm.
like just having that balance of how could we use restorative justice as a way to say, we realize you're young and you like to stay up till 3 in the morning, but your neighbors are not young and they like to go to bed at 9 o'clock at night. And how can we work something out to make sure everybody is, you
Yeah,
know,
no bagpipes at
Right.
2
yes.
a.m. Beyond the steps described in Part A of this question, what additional steps could be taken to mitigate the disparate impact?
I think one thing the enforcement component needs to be culturally aware with the
Mm.
people they're dealing with.
Hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
I also think one thing that I worry about is that especially if it's a civil violation, I realize that carries a different, connotation, but I worry about the impact of sending police every single time. And I realize the police are sort of
Hmm.
the people that you call. But at the same time, sometimes it probably would be better to send someone else who could just have a conversation versus someone standing there with a gun. And that might be the social worker, that might be the community outreach person, whatever that might be,
Mhm.
but that might be a better way to approach a situation that's not a public safety issue, for instance. So,
Mm. Yeah.
because as soon as someone's knocking on your door and they're the police, you probably get pretty defensive. That's my guess.
Yeah. Or afraid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tension, rising of tension. Um, I just had a thought. Um, I wonder if we could maybe suggest a list of community resources that could be kind of on call as the designees of the enforcement team.
Mm,
For example, like, one or two of us on the JEDB committee, or somebody from restorative justice organization, or, community members who are willing to be volunteers to
Hmm.
be the designees.
yeah. Or even, I think that I'm going to put my, city manager hat on. I'm not a city manager, but if the city manager was here, he'd say things like volunteers with that in that kind of situation could potentially be a liability because they're just volunteers. But I
Hmm.
think the idea of community resources, for the designees, the enforcement team to reach out to say, hey, we're going to deal with this property owner tenant group that's we're having a really difficult time with. Could you come with us? Could
Hmm.
you
Yep.
be a part of our, as we're approaching them? Or we would like to recommend that they come to see you. Are you okay with that? Whatever the
Hmm.
process might be, but like what having that list of community resources might be really helpful and
Yeah,
might
absolutely.
address the situation and de-escalate it in a very simple way versus creating an enforcement issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Like, so
even,
go ahead,
or
Lee.
even we're having a problem with this person who's also a member of the Elks, and we know that you're one of the Elks. And do you have any ideas that might be of help?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, to have a list of options to draw from, and like the enforcement team might be like, okay, well, here's a situation. The police have just given us information about three violations. This
Mhm.
blah blah blah. This is the situation that's going on. Who can we call on in this situation? Well, we're not going to send the fire chief and the police chief, or, police officer. We're going to
Mhm.
send Let's send these other folks instead because that's more appropriate to the situation.
Well, or let's talk about before they even get to the third one. If they go to this for the
Mm,
second time in 60 days,
yep.
hey, we think it would be helpful if you two groups that are not getting you two neighbors can
Hmm.
you go work with community, restorative justice? Because maybe we can settle it that way and you're not going to get to a third offense.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. I think this has been a helpful process here.
I agree.
Yeah.
Um, and is there anything else that we want to add? We've just finished up with the assessment tool here. I will tell you that I did not indicate who said what in terms of going over the assessment tool. It's just these are the ideas that we came up with.
Yeah.
Um,
Great. That's very equitable of you.
Yes, I think so.
and for one thing, it would have been just too difficult to put the
Yep.
initials down for everybody. Um, and I think the minutes I'm just going to be indicating this is what we came up with for the assess through the assessment tool.
Yeah.
Great.
Um, okay.
But
Um,
again, maybe at the
Go ahead.
beginning of the whole thing, we could say something to the effect that this should have been consulted before, you know, before anything went into effect.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think encouraging the council, city manager to, um, I think you all have volunteered your time to do this, and I think it's fantastic. And I think that walking through this, I think we can all see the value of why we should do this ahead of time. And I hope that the city manager, the mayor, the police chief can recognize that, we're just trying to make it a better policy.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, any new business?
I have a question actually for the four of you,
Hmm.
because you're all up in 2026. Your terms end. Have you expressed
Um,
interest in
I have re-upped, and I did send an email suggesting that Greg, Rick, and Matt, I would, what is it? I support their reappointment to the committee.
Okay,
It didn't say a letter, it just said, so I didn't go into the real detail about it, but I
yeah,
just indicated to sent an email suggesting that they all be reappointed.
perfect. Okay. I was just curious because I hadn't seen it yet and I wanted to make sure that you all were interested in staying, and so it was just
Yeah,
curiosity.
and if you don't see it by whatever time, let me know and I can forward it to you.
Okay.
But it was just saying that basically I'm recommending these people. I didn't speak their praises to a great degree,
Yeah.
but
Well, that's okay. I think we slowly work our way through all the appointments, and we've
Mhm.
done a few every single meeting, and so you're probably in the queue, but I just was curious because I haven't heard anything or seen
Yeah.
anything. So,
And
Mhm.
I'm assuming that all three of you re-upped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that kind of brings up a little topic. When we send in these things, we get no feedback as to whether or not it was received, and you know, that would be really helpful to know,
yeah.
especially when there's a deadline involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
I dropped mine off in
Well,
person.
Yeah.
that's one way of knowing for sure.
Well, I don't
I
know.
know I emailed mine on the 29th. Just to,
I can follow up with the city manager and make sure that you all are. I can just say we had a meeting and I just wanted to check to make sure the four of you are
okay.
up for reappointments. And um, are there any questions? Did you not receive anything? Because it sounds like everyone has sent their stuff in. So,
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I sent in a recommendation for Williams, so
Mhm.
okay.
we should all be. But again, the question is, hopefully it all got there. I mean, I'm sure it did, but it would be nice to know for sure.
Yeah, like, yes, we
Mhm.
received it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
would
Mhm.
just.
And the way that it works, I'll just let you know that you don't have to come for an interview. It just will be on the consent agenda because you're all current members and you don't have to interview. You don't have to do anything. And it'll just, all of your information will be included in our packet and we'll read through it. And assuming there's no questions, you'll just be part of the consent agenda. So,
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
Right.
So, discussion of items for future meetings. Um, do we want to do this with another one of the ordinances for our next meeting? I'm looking at, like, there's one on conduct in parks and public spaces.
Well,
Yeah.
just is are there any, interesting upcoming ordinance proposals or anything that we can, get ahead of the curve while on?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
there's none that I know of. But I can ask,
Okay.
I can inquire and see if there's anything that's sort of on the back burner that might be
Mm.
simmering and coming up to the,
Front burner.
yeah.
So yeah, would that be a policy thing? Like, okay, when a policy is being created, written, we have to consult with these people. Is that a policy thing, or is that just like whatever member of the council is creating the policy does it their own way, and they put it on the table at a council meeting?
So usually members of the council, in the 2 years that I've been on, members of the council don't usually bring policies or ordinances to the council. It's certainly possible. But in my experience, it's been the city manager, the mayor, the police chief that are sort of pushing the policies. And there's usually, sort of a reason why there's a
Mm. But there's no policy that kind of guides that process.
no,
It's just
no.
I'm assuming anyone can bring something,
Yep.
and then city
okay.
council will look into it.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Okay.
we just the last policy, which actually I forgot about this one. The last policy we approved was the public nudity policy because there was a person in the community who wanted to open a nude taxi service, and we were concerned about that. So we created a public nudity policy. It doesn't say you can't be nude in public, but you have to have, like, if you wanted to do a naked bike ride, you could do that, but you have to have a permit for it, kind of thing.
Okay.
No,
So,
no more new taxi drivers for me, I guess.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Greg. Sorry, Greg.
Guess you're gonna have to find a new business.
I guess so, yeah.
Sorry. Or you'll have to go somewhere else, maybe
Yeah.
Montpelier.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
But that did not come because I didn't even think about the equity of a new public nudity policy, to be honest.
Well, under Vermont law, there's no, you can't take your clothes off in public,
Yeah,
but as long as you start that way.
yeah,
Hmm.
Huh.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
But I can say as a woman, I would not want to walk up to a taxi and get in and realize that the driver was nude. There's no part of me that wants to.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, as a man, I don't want to do that either, to be honest with you.
I'm uncomfortable enough as it is just getting into a car with a stranger. And if they have no clothes on, I think that would be even more uncomfortable.
Mhm. Okay.
So
So,
yeah, so I'm sorry, just kind of going back to
go ahead.
the question around like how policy is brought to the table. So the city manager, the mayor, or whomever generates policy and then submits it to the council to deliberate, read through.
Yeah,
So could it be put forth, could a policy be put forth that once a proposed policy is submitted, that it goes through a particular
process.
process?
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Now, the council would have to agree to it,
Right.
and maybe they would. I don't know. But it's something that we could talk about. Absolutely.
Just a thought.
Okay. So, if there's nothing, no suggestions for items for future meetings, I think if we look at the ordinances, there are a number of other ordinances that could have a disparate impact. I think I've read one and two, glanced at three and seven. But if there are any ordinances that you would want to take a look at, um, we've got animals and fowl, buildings and building construction, electricity, fire protection and prevention, minimum housing, industrial safety, salvage yards, licenses, offenses and miscellaneous provisions, plumbing, signs, streets and sidewalks. That could be one. Swimming pools, vehicles for hire. That must be where the nudity ordinance is in.
No, it's just a general, I think
Okay.
it's a general one.
Traffic, trash, water and sewer services, tree ordinance, vehicles permitted on private property, fire EMS service reimbursement, vacant buildings, community investment ordinance, conduct in parks and public spaces, and then there's a unified development ordinance.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's huge.
Hmm?
It's enormous.
Okay. So, if no one else has any ideas, then what I'll do is we can come up with one to look at before our next meeting. Um, if if no one comes up with one, I think I'll probably suggest that we look at the conduct in parks and public spaces because that is something.
That seems like a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I also think knowing ahead of time, like knowing before I leave this meeting is super helpful just because then I can
Okay.
like go ahead and take some time to do it versus waiting until just a week before. But that's
Okay.
just my personal preference.
Okay. So why
Okay.
don't we go with the conduct in public parks and spaces and look at that
Seconded.
ordinance put that one through the equity tool for the next meeting.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
And we do not have any visitors, so no need for visitors and public comment. Our next meeting should be Thursday, June 11th at 6:30 p.m.
Okay.
William, quick question. What was which ordinance?
25?
Conduct. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Great.
I'm looking at it on my Kindle because I can look at that while without losing everything looking at the computer. So, yeah, conduct in parks and public spaces. I haven't looked at it, but I think that would be a good one to look at.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's only one page, so
Oh,
No.
short.
Okay, well, no. I think doing one at a time is probably the best thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll try and do some more work on the language access policy this month.
Okay. Uh, Anything that anyone wants to add? Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
I
Aye. Okay. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank you,
night, everyone.
everyone.
Good meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.